Lily?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, very dear friends of WISC, and welcome to our second Zoom meeting. This meeting will be moderated by Dr. Batya Brutin and will actually open a set of two Zooms devoted to women's voice in Auschwitz. Today's meeting, we are going to focus on individual women and their voices, whereas the next Zoom will be devoted to women that acted as a part of a group or an organization. My logic was to move from the micro to the macro, from the individual to the particular, and to a general movement or movements that women acted in. I wish us all a very, very challenging and interesting evening. And again, I dearly thank everyone that joined us today. And I wish us, of course, a very challenging and interesting evening. Dr. Brutin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening from Israel, and welcome to the first panel in the series about women in Auschwitz. I would like to begin with a prayer in memory of those who lost their lives in the October War, prayer for a quick recovery for the wounded, and above all, a prayer for the immediate return of those abducted by Hamas in Gaza. In the panel Women Voices from Auschwitz, we will listen to three speakers who will present to us stories about three special women who were in Auschwitz. I'd like to mention that questions to the speakers can be sent either in the chat or in the discussion that will take place after the three lectures. Now I'm very delighted to invite the first lecturer, Professor Lily Halpert Zamir, who is the co-founder of the academic of WISC, and she is also the academic director of WISC. And Professor Zamir is a researcher of Holocaust and Gender Studies. She is a member of the Academic Council as well as the head of its Center for Women's and Gender Studies at the David Yellin Academic College of Education in Jerusalem. Professor Zamir serves as the presidential advisor of gender equality, as well as the sexual harassment treatment and prevention commissioner of the college. She has published several books, 7 of which deal with the Holocaust, as well as dozens of articles in Hebrew and English that focus on Holocaust and gender studies, and one monography of Danilo Kish in Serbo-Creation. Professor Zamir will talk tonight about Lily Kashticher, the woman who wrote in Auschwitz. And let me share the, find it now, but in a minute I'll find it. Lily, the floor is yours, and I'll look for
Thank you. Thank you very much, Batya. In my presentation tonight, I would like to focus on a unique historical phenomenon called Lily Kashticher, her deeds and works as a young woman in Auschwitz-Birkenau, from April to November 1944. I'd like to approach her story as a phenomenon since her literary works were already very widely discussed in many of my articles, and also a book that I wrote and was published in 2022 by Moreshet and will be translated to English soon for our English readers. But her story I think can serve us as a case study that enlightens us the need of ongoing studies and research on the unique fate of women in the Holocaust, focusing on her story in the very huge and well-researched subject of his story dealing with the Holocaust. And in our case, of course, it's Auschwitz. My story begins in 2010 when I was teaching in David Yellin College a course named The Unique Fate of Women in the Holocaust. This is a course given in the history department every other year, and that's why it's very crowded, very demanded, extremely emotionally and intellectually challenging one. At the end of one of my lecture, a young student approached me with a very shy smile, and she said quite quietly, "You know, I have a sister called Lily, and she's named after my grandmother, Lily. She was in Auschwitz, and she survived Auschwitz." Such an opening would usually be like music to my ear. But it was 7 o'clock in the evening. I was teaching from the morning. I was exhausted. All I wanted to do is just to run away and go home. So I said, "Okay, great." "No, you don't understand," the student insists. "You don't understand. My grandmother wrote in Auschwitz, and my mother can show you her writings." "Great," I replied, while I was measuring the distance from my desk to the door. At the same evening, Miss Daniela Sela, the student's mother, called me. I was already, after a good bath, with a good cup of coffee, and I was amazed to hear from Daniela that her mother, Lili Kasticher, who was originally from Yugoslavia, which is connected with my doctoral thesis many, many years before, not only that she was in Auschwitz-Birkenau, she survived, but she also wrote some prose and poetry, and she managed to smuggle everything out from the Inferno and brought everything to Israel. But as far as I know, I said to Daniela on the phone, no private woman, no private person could write in Auschwitz. "But my mother did," answered Daniela, "and I can show you." At that moment, I said, "Shall we meet tonight?" "No," she was laughing. "Let's meet tomorrow morning." That phone call, I must admit, changed my life as a researcher. Almost everything that I have known before that evening about Auschwitz changed. It changed because, as most of us that are dealing with Auschwitz-Birkenau, I knew that we have writings from there, but we can divide it into 4 principal groups. Number 1, the forced postcards that the victims, the inmates, were forced to write to their relatives, telling them that they are in a good place, the conditions are fair, and the food is sufficient, and the work is reasonable. But those postcards were written only by those who knew German and knew how to write in German. The second group, which is very well known, is the group of the Sonderkommando that not only documented the happenings in Birkenau, but also took pictures of the killing and the gas chambers. The third group were the political prisoners that could somehow get papers and writing implements. And the last group, group number 4, were the Czech prisoners from the Czech family camp in Birkenau. But a private woman writing in Auschwitz, I did not hear about it before. And yes, many people said that they wrote in Auschwitz. Many letters I got when I started my journey telling about private persons who apparently wrote in Auschwitz. One of the most famous examples is, of course, Ruth Kluger, that we were sure that she wrote in Auschwitz until in 1994 she gave an interview and she said, no, I wrote in Gross-Rosen camp, but yes, I wrote what I remembered that I was reciting and telling in Auschwitz. I wrote about my Auschwitz memories, but she couldn't, as no one else, she couldn't, and she didn't write in Auschwitz. Now let's go a little bit back to Lily Kashticher and her story. Lily was born in 1923 in Petroslavo, Yugoslavia, and subsequently, for her good luck, lived in Novi Sad, which meant that she did not she was at Novi Sad until 44 and not like most of Yugoslavian Jews that already in 42 were evacuated. She was deported to Auschwitz in April 1944 and got the cassette number 8965. It was tattooed on her arm. From there, she was assigned to Gross-Rosen camp Oberhohenalbe labor camp, where she worked for the Lawrence factory until liberation in May 1945. Despite the common belief that female inmates in Auschwitz did not write because of the severe punishments against those who were caught with a stub of pencil and a piece of paper, Lily somehow managed to write. Not only she wrote, but she also tried to encourage her inmate friends to write, or at least to participate in her reading evenings that she used to do in Birkenau. She knew, of course, that if she had been caught, she would be killed. And still she dared and she did it. From Auschwitz, she left us a small collection of poems written in Auschwitz, and also a political social manifesto called Rules of Behavior, which she developed later on her next camp. She wrote on small pieces of paper with her very small handwriting. Batya, can we see one example of her writings there? Most of the poems, if you see on the left side, there was a tiny drawing. And in some of the poems, like this one, we had on the right side the date. Out of her 9 poems, we have 5 with specific dates and 2 only with the year and place. All those little pieces of paper, on one side was the poetry, on the other side it was a piece of paper from the office, mainly with re-questions forms. Now the question is, of course, how did Lily got paper and writing implements in Birkenau? In an interview published in an Hungarian language Israeli newspaper, Wikelet, which is the New East, on February 1951, Lily explained how she stayed alive, and she also relieved the waste. There is some noise in the background. Please close your mics. Please, please. And she also explained how did she get writing implements in Birkenau. And the story goes like that. When she was young, somebody gave her a book. She had a book about palm reading. And while being in Birkenau, she decided to cheer up her friends by reading from their palms. And of course, she read very optimistic and good news from their palms. Once the couple approached her and said, "Can you please read my palm?" And she did. And of course, there were very good news that she told the couple. Slowly, they became friendly enough, and the couple invited her to read and write to her boyfriend who was in the front, and also illustrate the letters that she sent into the front, because she saw how gifted Lily was and how good were her hands in drawings. That's how Lily managed to be in the office, and that's how she got those little pieces of paper, and when she could, she stole them and she put them in her pocket, and also some crayons. If we are looking at her writings in general, we can divide them in three categories. The first one is her writings in Auschwitz-Birkenau. We have about 9 poems that I dealt with. There must be more, but some of them I couldn't trace, and those that I could trace, I was not able to read because the paper was not good enough preserved. What's very interesting that in Auschwitz, also 2 friends of her, Piri and Yutzi Abraham, wrote 2 pieces of poetry, and it was with the prize that she offered some of her bread. Also, she wrote the code of behavior, which is very interesting because it's really a political and social manifesto, which starts here. There is no I, only we as a group, we can survive. The second category is a bunch of poems and drawings, a quite large number already, from Gross-Rosen-Oberhochenalbe camp, where she was until liberation in 1945. What is very interesting here to see that on the second camp, when writing and drawing was not that dangerous, Lily encouraged her friends to do the artwork. She was the one who gave them the writing implements, crayons, pieces of paper, etc. But she herself created less. She was the organizer of the group. Whereas in Auschwitz, where it was very dangerous to write, she did the main writing, which shows also a kind of leadership. She wouldn't risk their lives. She was ready to risk hers, but not theirs. And the third category of Lily's writings is the diary that she wrote already in Israel, with her memories in Auschwitz. And also she was referring to some of the poems that she wrote there and connecting them to the facts as she remembered them. In my book, I also pointed out that not only those 9 poems plus the 2 poems of her friends and the manifesto were smuggled out of Auschwitz, but also a very interesting letter in Yiddish that Alex, her son, brought me in 1916. And it was very interesting to see. It's not her writing. It was translated, and you can see the full text in my book. It was translated for me into Hebrew, but it's very interesting, and it's a future research to see why has she chosen to save that particular letter? Who wrote it? Who gave it to her? And what were the reasons that she chose to save that letter and bring it with her? I'm running out of time. Am I not,
Almost,
Batya?
almost.
Okay. So I would like to conclude with my argument. Listen, not only that Lily wrote in Auschwitz-Birkenau, not only that she organized her friends to listen to her writings, not only she wrote a political manifesto, but also she had the courage to face all these difficulties as not belonging to any organization. She had no backing. She was not a part of anything. She was one of the many prisoners there. And I think that by writing, she has done the opposite from what was expected from the victims by the Germans. She proved by her creativity that the group in general and she in particular are far away from being the Untermensch. And I would like to share with you one of the things that Primo Levi has recited in his book, The Drowned and the Saved. He's reciting there a speech of one of the SS men who is speaking to the prisoners, and he's saying to them, listen, nothing will remain from you. Nothing will come out from Auschwitz. No evidence. It doesn't matter how the war is going to be ended, but everything will be cleaned, destroyed. You people will not survive. None of you. And if one of you survives, who will believe to your stories? Well, Primo Levi survived, Lily Kasticher survived, and they told their stories. According to Nietzsche, we can see Lily as a metaphysical revenger. But unfortunately, when Lily came to Israel, nobody was listening to her. Nobody was free to listen to any of the victim and survivors' voices, especially if they were women. Women who did not belong to any organization, partisans, ghetto rebellions, and so forth and so forth. I think had she been a man, her story and her bravery and her personality as a metaphysical revenger would be a part of most of the history books that we have in our schooling systems. But unfortunately, Lily was a woman and she was from Yugoslavia, which is also a Jewry that was not discussed and researched enough. So her voice was quite unheard. Somehow she always reminds me of the story that Virginia Woolf wrote. Had William Shakespeare, if William Shakespeare had a sister, well, Lily Kastiche is the sister. Nobody was really free and open-minded to listen to her. I hope that by giving this lecture and in my articles and the book, which will be in English very soon, I'm trying to start to begin a very modest way of rehabilitation for Lily Kasticher and the female voice, which was not heard, not at the right time and not at the right place. It was too late and too far from what she needed while she was alive. Lily Kasticher died in October 1973. And her story and her voice must be heard. Thank you, everyone, for sharing with me.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily, for revealing a special and unknown story in an interesting way. Thank you. The second presenter is Dr. Noach Beninga, who is a Holocaust historian and an associate researchers at the Vidal Sassoon International Center for the Study of Antisemitism, affiliated with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He received several prizes and honors for his academic performance. Dr. Beninga is currently part of the Center Next Major Max Weber International Research Project, Global Papacy of Pius XII, Catholicism in a Divided World, 1945-1958. His project entitled New Catholics, the Holocaust and the New Catholic Theology, of Jews and its reception. Dr. Beninga will talk about, as you see, Grete Salus, an angel was not there. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Batya, and thank you, Lily, for the invitation. So as Batya just mentioned, the original title of this talk was An Angel Was Not There, which is a reference to one of the several titles under which Greta Salus's book was published. But now having reflected a little bit more on this, I've changed the subject, the title at least, as you can see, to Greta Salus Faces in Auschwitz. But I should now admit that this reflects more of the article that I'm currently writing, and I won't be able to show absolutely everything here because of the time. However, I do hope to sketch a general outline and to highlight a few points. And I would like to mention that this is a work that's still in progress and to thank the organizers for putting me in touch with Nomi Barshavit, Greta Salus's daughter, who also helped pick out the pictures for this slideshow. So let's briefly go through the Lebenslauf of Greta Salus, born in 1910 in what is today the Czech Republic. She studied dance under Mary Wittmann in Düsseldorf, expressionist dance. So she's a dancer, not a writer or a choreographer. Later, she settled in Prague with her husband Fritz Salus. And in 1942, Greta and Fritz were deported to Theresienstadt. In 1944, in October, they were deported to Auschwitz, where Fritz was immediately murdered, a fact of which Greta did not find out until much later. And a few days later, Greta was transferred to the forced labor camp in Oderon. In 1945, after liberation, she completed her initial manuscript, which included poems she had already written in Oderon. And she edited this manuscript until the summer of 1947, when it is signed. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the original drafts left, so I'm basing myself on the published documentation. In 1949, together with her daughter, she moved to Israel, to Kibbutz Ein Gev. And afterwards, oh, wait, I can't see here because of this, I guess. In 1958, her book was published in 2 editions. That's after a significant lag. It was published twice. The editions are not entirely the same. We'll get into that. In 1965, she moved to Netanya, and she passed away in 1995. So basically, wait, let's go back to this. Yes, okay. So Salus belongs to what is considered the group of early writers about the Holocaust, early women writers. This is a subset of what I'm calling the canon of women writers, and I hope to be able to talk about that more, perhaps in this series of lectures. These are accounts which researchers, among them, for example, Namashik, considered to be entirely different from the later accounts because they were written under the shock of the initial events. They tend to contain lurid descriptions or have more blunt language, at times coarse, sarcastic, and considered less literary than other works. I don't think this is the case for Salus's text. I hope to show you that. Okay. This is what Salus says about her writing process. She wrote night and day. I'm just going to read you the English here. The text, of course, does not exist in English, so these are my translations. I wrote night and day. Next to me within reach was a loaf of bread. As in the camp, we had always dreamt of having an entire loaf. So the result is that today we have 4 texts of Salus. These are the different editions. I won't go into them. They are, as I said, not entirely the same, and specifically, some of them do not contain a later addendum called In Zauberte Welt. The Hebrew edition, by the way, is considerably different from the German editions because it was edited for literary reading. I think in order to really deal with Salus, we need to treat all of these texts because some of them reflect certain changes, possibly indicating reception problems or editorial interventions. So the question is, what do we actually learn from Salus about Auschwitz and about women in Auschwitz? My supposition here is that we need to first become good readers of Salus in order to understand her. And my attempted answer is something having to do with faces and truth. Specifically, I want in the article to speak about four faces. That is, first, Auschwitz as the personification of death, which I will mention here. Secondly, the true face of the body, which is also on our list for today. Then third, the gray faces of those succumbing. And fourth, the twisted faces of those compliant. Won't get to these two final points today. So, Salus as a writer. Now, first of all, we should say here, Salus was a dancer and a choreographer. She was also a writer, but she probably did not think of herself as a writer. It seems from her writing that she wrote primarily for herself, poems and letters to people who wrote to her, correspondence. There is in her book a mix between prose and poetry, which need to be treated separately. The poems are a little bit more diverse than the prose material, and in this talk, I'm going to be focused on poems that I believe to be a form of self-talk, in which Salus speaks to a kleine Schwester, a younger sister, who I believe is actually she herself. But I'm checking this prisoner number. I believe we'll find out that it's her prisoner number. Salus's writing is characterized by a certain kind of minimalist naturalism, which I think is sometimes lost. Here you have one of the examples of the book. Du Baum, wie schön, wie stolz, wie frei. O tree, how beautiful, how proud, how free. This is the first poem in the book. And by the way, all of the various editions of Salus's text, the poems are all in the same order. That is, they're at the same point in the narrative, so we have to assume this has some kind of significance and is probably related to Salus's desire. So Salus is using the du, the second person familiar form, which is mostly used for a beloved or for God. At this specific point of entry into the concentration camp system. And to my ears, at least, these very, very simple lines resound with Salus's own pain and longing, which she only expresses obliquely through the tree, which is free. That is, the point is that she is not free. In other places, Salus uses, I think, unusual German verbs and adverbs and adjectives to paint what is a nuanced picture of her experience and the essence of the camp from her perspective. I have some examples here. For example, this use that she has when they're delivered to Auschwitz. She says, als wir aus dem Wagen herausgesprungen waren, schlug es auch schon über uns zusammen. After we had leapt out of the railway car, it suddenly engulfed us, or perhaps closed in over our heads. Zusammenschlagen über etwas, literally to engulf, also evokes the two constituting parts, zusammen, together, and schlagen, to beat. So you get the sense of a group that is being pushed together by external violence, and perhaps something of what Freud called the oceanic feeling. To me, this conjures up the image of a ship that's being sunk in the ocean, and all of the passengers are now drowning together. These thoughts, I think, are further developed in the addendum I mentioned, but I'm not going to go into that now. Now to the poems that are, in my opinion, a form of self-talk. So as I mentioned, these poems are addressed to Du kleine Schwester, or sometimes Du kleines Mädchen. This is, in some cases, a gendered equivalent to what in German is the unmarked third person, Mann, right, which sounds at least masculine. As I mentioned, I think this is her. She's talking to herself, also because in her camp relationships, of which we know in detail at least of two, Salus was always the younger sister, not the older sister. Specifically, her friend from Theresienstadt, perhaps Mina, This is the name supplied by Nomi because Salus's book contains only one name, and that name is the other woman with whom she was in this kind of supportive relationship, Elsa Grote. Her friend from Theresienstadt was more practical than she was. For example, she pulled her out of the wrong line in Auschwitz, saving her life. But this evoked in Salus sharp feelings of inadequacy and memories of a childhood friend who she had idolized. So what my thesis here is that these poems of self-talk are Salus's attempt to encourage herself, possibly helping herself to survive. Here we have the point where I think she refers to herself. We are marked, nameless, number 59780. This is an Odoron number. We know it's an Odoron number because it says specifically here that it is inscribed on a piece of canvas painted on our breast. Salus was not tattooed in Auschwitz as she was in transit there. The word, by the way, that she uses for inscribed is very interesting, gebannt. It evokes a world of magic. Ban is a hex, a spell. And also, if you like, the Golem of Prague, who had this certain number, letters inscribed on his forehead, Aleph, Mem, Taf, Emet, which animated him. And when the Aleph was removed, it turned into Met, and the Golem was de-animated. So in some sense, it seems to me, and I think I could prop this up with further examples from her book, that she sees this number as animating her camp existence. Now we should mention, I think I have, that Salus was in Auschwitz for transit. So the time she spent in the camp was perhaps only 1 week, maybe even less. Now we might be tempted to say that this is not enough time for us to consider seriously what Salus has to say about Auschwitz. However, the camp plays a major role in Salus's narrative. It is one of the most frequent words mentioned in the narrative, and also affected her life significantly, as the camp is where her mother and husband were murdered. It also forms the backdrop to her time in Odoron, and she and the other prisoners were constantly afraid of being sent back to Auschwitz. Moreover, her Oberaufseherin was trained in Auschwitz. So this had a kind of organizational effect on the culture in Odoron. This leads me to the subject of Auschwitz and truth. So a major subject in Salus's account is the struggle to realize the truth of Auschwitz and the effect of this truth on her psyche. In prose that to me evokes the later movie by Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal, Salus comes up with the following line. Denn jetzt habe ich blitzartig begriffen, wusste, dies war der Wettlauf mit dem Tod. For now, I realized suddenly in a flash, this was the race against death. So basically in Salus's narrative, Auschwitz is the personification of death, but the struggle and the Auschwitz part of her narrative is coming to terms with this, realizing this. In order to realize this, she has to peel back layers of self-illusion until ultimately some kind of core is uncovered. This process of Entzauberung, disenchantment or disillusionment, is also treated in the 1962 addendum, which was written in 1947, by the way, and connected to the of shedding of self-illusion, rupture with others, the world, and self-disassociation. The subject of self-disassociation is connected to her discovery of the truth of the body as other, which is going to be the final point of this talk. I have 1 minute left, so I hope I'll be able to say something about this. Basically, as these protective layers are peeled back, she finds out that at the core of her being, there is something that is not really herself. It is herself as another. And here we have it in her words. I'll just read the English. Unwavering body, a soldier without morals, a true mercenary in his piracy, he imperiously demanded his rights, did not give up so easily, and deprived people of the benefit of a quick and easy death. Once he got up to fight, he fought mercilessly to the bitter end with every weapon at his disposal. Now, this uncanny truth is also related to gendered issues that Salus brings up, which researchers find particularly typical of the early narratives. I'm talking right now about women abandoning their children in Auschwitz, a subject that later became incredibly taboo. Salus raises the subject. She knows that she's going to meet opposition by her readers, but she does it anyway, telling the story of a Hungarian doctor who had to make this forced choice and afterwards felt that her motherly instinct had betrayed her, or perhaps she had betrayed her motherly instinct. Salus and the fellow inmates, they treat this very sensitively and also put this into this box of the body as the other. And she says, in a normal atmosphere with no special demands on her physical and mental resistance, she might not have been able to endure it. In this life, however, the body fought independently without being given permission to do so. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noah, for presenting an interesting and important story about, I think, spiritual resistance in Auschwitz. And that brings us to the last lecture that will be given by Dr. Rachel Kollender, who is a musicologist and ethnomusicologist. Her research is mainly in the field of Jewish music. She taught for over 50 years at Bar-Ilan University and other academic institutions. She lectured at many conferences, and her articles have been published in periodicals and books in Hebrew and English. The subject of music in the Holocaust has been her main subject of research during the last 20 years and includes collecting, documenting, and analyzing of this repertoire. Dr. Kollender will talk now about Ishaide von Dier, Else Weber, a musician perished in Auschwitz. The floor is yours, Rachel.
Thank you. How can I share?
Go down, press share. Share screen.
You see it? You can see it?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
share
so
screen.
I sit back. I do first the share screen.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
now?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me to this, to have a speech about Ilse Weber in this forum. Ilse Herrlinger Weber was a poet, musician, author, and as a musicologist, I focus on her creative musical talent and the tragic loss of a young, outstanding person and talent. She was born in 1903 in Witkowice in the Czech Republic. Her family was well rooted in the Jewish community and celebrated religious and cultural holidays. She was inspired by her mother was a widow, and learned to sing and play many instruments. She began publishing poems, so we can discuss her personality as a musician, but she started as a writer. She began publishing poems and stories in magazines, mainly for children, at the age of 13. But these pieces were printed later and translated into many languages. In 1928, Tales for Children. Her children's tales are didactic, guiding and exposing children to the realities of the world, facing them with religious values, Jewish values, and Zionist themes. In 1930, she married Wilhelm Weber. 2 children were born, and the family planned even to immigrate to Israel, but unfortunately, out. The situation in the Czech Republic was, from the point of anti-Semitism, disturbing her. And in 1938, the family succeeded in getting the bigger boy. Here we have the picture of the 2 of them. The bigger boy was called Hanush, out of Czechoslovakia. He was sent to England and then moved with a friend of Ilse to Sweden, where he stayed during the war and survived. Ilse wrote a text, of course, and the poem, and composed a song of longing, of waiting to see him again. Here we have this, a piece of it. Most of it, just to explain, she was well rooted in German, in the German language and in Czech language. So we will have here the musical examples will be both in German and in Czech. This is in German.
We can't hear you. We can't hear anything.
I think it needs to be in slideshow to play music. It's not in slideshow.
No.
So what? How can I stop?
Stop. Just a second. Just a second.
How? What am I going
Try
to do?
again. Try again. Share
No,
screen again. And
well, I cannot close it.
Yes, you did.
No. Just to leave,
Okay.
to write the. Where do I have?
Calm down. It's going to be okay. Just a second.
Oh, well, no, I can't see anything. I can't. No,
Okay,
no,
down.
please.
Try again. Try again.
I cannot close it. Okay, I'll try again. We tried before and it was okay.
Okay, it happens.
You see anything?
No.
No, you don't see. Okay, so I'll do the share screen. And what now?
Go to the left and press
No, I
sound.
don't have it. No, I don't have it.
So, okay, come down. Let me try share the screen.
No, I don't have it. I don't.
Do you see now?
Yeah, I see it.
Yes. Okay, good. Let me try.
It's okay, but it takes a few seconds until it starts. Do you hear anything?
Yes.
Hoch sind die Berge und tief ist das Meer, mein Herz ist müd und Sehn so schwer, und der Regen rinnt, warum bist du so fern, mein Kind? Und der Regen rinnt, Gott selbst hat uns getrennt, mein Kind. Du sollst nicht Leid und Elend sehen, sollst nicht auf steinigen Gassen gehen. Und der Regen rinnt und der Regen.
What happened?
Nothing. I stopped it.
Ah,
I stopped.
Okay, so you will go on with screening the.
Yes, just tell me when and I'll do it.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Well, the text in German is very clear. It's raining. Just the nature is as usual, but I'm waiting to see you. I'm longing to see her child. In 1941, she volunteered to work in the Jewish orphanage in Prague, but soon afterwards the family was deported to Terezin. And I wonder if she had a chance to meet Greta Salus, because both were also deported to Auschwitz later in October 44. I don't know. I didn't find the name of Salus while doing my small, tiny research about Ilse Weber. During her imprisonment, she worked at the infirmary. That's how they called a kind of a clinic or a hospital for children. There she composed many nursery rhymes, lullabies, poetry, and children's songs. For example, we have in number 4, screen number 4, we have a song that a good morning song. Hear it? We will hear how optimistic it is. I don't know what the sound. Sorry. Background noises. That's how she asked the children to wake up in the morning in that dormitory, in that orphanage. In the clinic, how they called it. And for getting them asleep, she composed the famous lullaby called Vigela. And this is, we have it in on the screens, small screens of number 5 and 6. First, here we have it in Hebrew and sorry, in German, and that's the original text, and in English, the English translation. We can see 3 stanzas. The first 2 lines are repeated at the end of each stanza, which makes the song very easy to remember and to repeat. Even the music is very, very similar at the beginning and at the end of each stanza. Each stanza speaks about one subject. It's the wind in the first, the moon in the second, and the world in the last stanza. How silent is the world? And it's very interesting because it has a double meaning. The world is very silent at night, and the children go to sleep. But the truth is that the world is silent and doesn't respond to all the horrible things that are done and that appear, that happen during that period. Let's hear this Vigela.
6?
Yes. It takes a few seconds. So we have heard the repetitions, we have a very easy to understand and to repeat the text, and the whole musical piece is very, very easy to remember. In 1944, the family was separated. Her husband, Willy, with whom they were together before, he was deported to Auschwitz and later to Gleiwitz. Ilse stayed with the children, but she had the feeling that something is going to happen also with her, and she composed a kind of a prophetic song before she was leaving Therezin to Auschwitz, and here we have it in number 7. Number 7 is Ade Kamerad, farewell, my friend, before she knew that she was going to leave Therezin and be deported to Auschwitz. And here on the 4th line, we have Ich scheide von dir. This is what I took as the title of my speech. Let's hear it. Again, 3 stanzas, again, lined, here we have only 5, it's actually 5, 6 lines, the same, almost the same form of text and of music. So the last line is always repeated. I don't know if we have enough time to hear the whole song, but yeah, you will decide.
No, we're almost done with the time, but I cannot see the song.
Here, it's the black one. That's
okay, let's hear the song and conclude.
Yeah, yes.
At least part of it.
Maybe one stanza is enough.
Ade Kamerad, hier teilt sich dein Pfad, denn morgen muss ich fort. Ich scheide von dir, man treibt mich von dir, ich geh mit dem Polentransport, ich geh mit dem Polentransport.
Can I close it?
That's it's
that was the
so
first
optimistic. It's so different from the text of just living and not seeing anybody else anymore, and still full of optimism. But shortly after, on the beginning of October 44, the transport of the sick children was deported to Auschwitz. She was not supposed to join them, but she did with Thomas, her her little son, and they appeared in. They came to Auschwitz on the 6th of October, and they murdered upon arrival. The last evidence of Ilse is given by an old friend of the Weber family, whom she met in her last moment before entering the gas chambers in Auschwitz on the day that they arrived. She recognized him and asked what was about to happen to her and the children. His answer was, "It's a gas chamber. I have often heard you singing in the clinic, probably in Therezin. Go into the chamber, sit with the children on the floor and start singing. Sing what you always sang with them." Weber, Ilse, hugged one of the children and informed them, "So we will not be taking a shower." Willy and Hanush survived and were reunited in 1945 in Poland, first in Poland, and then they moved back to Czechoslovakia. The works of Ilse, many questions probably will be how the musics and the texts survived. So the works of Ilse survived thanks to the extraordinary efforts of her husband. He had buried them in Therezin, and after liberation, he returned to Therezin and picked them out. Ilse was a wonderful, smiling lady, generous, compassionate. Her presence and resistance had a tremendous impact on those around her. She believed that the music should go on in spite of everything, because music was for her a kind of temporal relief, expressing the combat against death. Her compositions had been a source of inspiration. That's what people told Hanush and Willy after the war, and helped these people retain their will to live. She was an excellent musician. Her composed simple tunes to poems that she wrote, singing and accompanying herself on the guitar. We had that picture with the lauta, with the lute. And her songs and poems remain probably a crucial part of both familial and cultural testimony, and bring to life her voice, her memory, and her legacy, which tragically perished in Auschwitz. Ilse didn't survive, but today the forgotten voice of Ilse is preserved in her compositions, which are performed in countless occasions and on many stages over the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for telling us about one sad and important story about an enormous cultural loss that occurred in Auschwitz, where all, among other things, many talented Jews were murdered. Now is the time for questions from the audience, and please raise the hand note so we'll see you and see that you. Okay, I don't see any questions on the chat. Just see thank you notes. Toda raba notes. Let's see. Anyone would like to ask a question to the presenters? No? Okay.
I have a question. It's Rachel Perry.
I think Rachel just is okay. Rachel, you and then Noach. I see Noach raised his hand, but
Okay.
Rachel, where are you?
I can't put my
Oh, here
my
I
camera
see.
on. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, I see you. I see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
I had a question. Hi. Thank you so much. That was really fabulous and a lot of food for thought. I had a question for Noah, basically on your title, and given all of the kind of visual metaphors and so on, I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about this idea of faces, and because I don't think you had time to really go into it, and the different kinds of faces, as you said, faces of I'm looking for my notes here, as a representation of death of the body, the gray face of those murdered and the contorted face of those who were compliant, and kind of talk a little bit more, just elaborate on what you meant there in terms of metaphor, in terms of, I don't know, rhetorical strategies.
Great. Thank you for this question. I think that faces is one of Salus's major themes. I've been trying to back this up also statistically by analyzing her texts. So there's a technical problem here with the various texts, which are a little bit different. But the searches that I've done show that the most frequent word is actually mensch, right? Man, person. And face is maybe number 6 on this list, so pretty high. But of course, one of the defining characteristics of a person is their face. The word recurs often in Salus, and so then I started kind of trying to understand who it is that she's depicting. And this is how I got to these four different faces. There's also this connection between the idea of face and the idea of truth, right? And also the idea of face and the idea of God, right? Shivim panim la Torah, right? Although Salus herself was completely unreligious. So on the one hand, there's the face of Auschwitz because Salus and her husband were taken to Auschwitz completely not knowing where it is that they were going. They were hoping, despite the fact that they had been 2 years in Theresienstadt, they were still hoping that they were being sent to labor. And then the struggle of coming to terms with what was actually there, seeing the real face of Auschwitz, was a struggle with herself. It's not a linear process. It's not that she comes there and she understands. It's a back and forth process in which she has to dig through herself, and she's constantly being duped by the Germans, by Mengele, who appears to her as like an elegant Tanzmeister conducting the Polonaise, by her own hopes and dreams. And she has to kind of break through these levels of illusion until she sees this truth of Auschwitz as death itself. Then we have these faces of the prisoners. These are all, of course, female prisoners. So interesting from a gender perspective. On the one hand, we have, maybe the pit of despair is this face of the Gorgon, the witch, she calls her,
Nice.
the evil prisoner who works in the kitchen, and has a pile of margarine which she eats in front of their face while telling them that when they came the chimneys burned all night. But this is also connected. These are the compliance connected to prisoners who know how to behave in order to get power. So they're and also not prisoners. It has to be said, right? She afterwards she reflects on these insights when she's free, and she sees reflections in the free world as well. And then you have these gray faces. Gray is another one of these often repeated words in Salus. So you have these gray faces of the prisoners, not dead, dying. And again, not only prisoners, because afterwards she sees the same gray, which of course she also sees in the camp, not only in the faces, but in the colors of the camp. But she sees the same gray in the faces of the people in Prague. So I think those are the major faces. I also did want to take this one opportunity. Wait, I will share. I forgot to share the final slide, which includes the pictures that Nomi chose, and so maybe I can do that now. Here we go. Come on, there we go.
Oh, wow.
These are yeah. As you can see, Salus was very much connected to motion, and in fact, when she was given news of the final action in Terezin, she was actually conducting some kind of a dance class, and she continued to work in dance after she came to Israel. I think I actually was going to ask a question too. My question is to Lily and also to Batya, because Lily, you put a strong emphasis on the fact that no women were writing. I think it's very convincing, aside from your subject, Lily, of course. But then the question is about drawing, because from what I saw, there was much more drawing in Auschwitz than one would expect. I'm thinking of Agnieszka Shidarska's 2016 book, Lager Museum. Those were only men, as far as I know. And I believe there are other books that discuss this form of portrait drawing in free time as a kind of pastime. It's almost photography in the camp. So were there women who drew?
As far as we know, most of the drawing was done post-war and not during their being in the camp, unless they were a part of a certain organization or they had connections. For example, we see that Primo Levi in certain times was able to sit in the laboratory and had, because of that, the ability to write. But usually we don't have evidence, even not of drawing, unless again they belong to certain organizations. We don't have any proof that during being in Auschwitz-Birkenau, an individual that did not belong to any contact or organization was able to do so. So it goes for drawing as well, as far as we know today.
Okay, I have to object. I'm sorry, but there are many drawings in Auschwitz, small booklets with drawings and prisoners, women and men, drew in Auschwitz. And I think that, Noach, you can go to our last panel, in which I showed art from the Holocaust, and it is recorded. It's on the WISC website. And yes, they were also visual representations in the camp, in Auschwitz.
But then they
Okay.
had to be connected
Okay.
somehow to.
Some of them were in the artist ateliers.
So you see,
No,
it's connection. The artist
Yes.
atelier, it's a connection.
Just a second, but they also drew in hiding, personal reaction to their situation there. Okay, since it's very, very late, and there are people who already left us, I would like to thank the three wonderful speakers, because on the chat, I read so many compliments to the lectures, and also to all of you. And see you in the next panel in May.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
to all of you.
everybody. And I wish you all a pleasant evening.
Well.
And also, of course, happy Easter and happy Passover, which are already approaching us. Let's hope that they are going to bring us better days.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
you.
Batya, for your
Thank you.
moderation. And see you all on our next panel.
Thank
Bye.
you very
Bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Batya,
you.
for the
Bye.
Batya, thank you very, very much for your assistance, technical assistance. Otherwise,
Okay.
it would
Okay. Thank
work.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.